Buenos días.
Good morning,
Buenos
everyone.
días a todos los que
And to those of
están
you who are
ya
already joining
ingresando.
us, we're going
Vamos a
to give
esperar
a couple of
un par de
minutes
minutitos
for
más
other people
a
to
que más
join the
gente se
webinar as
sume
well, and we
y
will
en
start
breve
in a minute.
estamos iniciando. For those who don't speak Spanish, as said, we are going to have automatic translation, so you can connect to the English channel. It's under in the options in the Zoom application. We'll start in 2 minutes. Bueno, ahí me
Okay,
escuchan.
can you hear me?
Arrancamos entonces
So
con el
we're going to
webinar de
start
hoy.
today's
Como dije, lo
webinar,
vamos a hacer
and
hoy en
as I said,
castellano.
we're going to
Al
be
ser todas las
speaking
ponentes
in
que tenemos
Spanish
hoy
because
hispanohablantes,
all of our
vamos
speakers are
a
Spanish
realizar el
speakers.
webinar en este idioma. Pero como
However,
decía
as I was
antes,
saying at the
para los que
beginning,
recién
for
llegaron,
those of you
hay
just
traducción
joining us
automática.
today,
There is
there's
automatic translation.
simultaneous
For those who don't speak
translation.
Spanish, you can connect with the English channel option under in the Zoom application. Así que
So you
pueden
can
elegir su
choose
canal.
the English channel.
Em,
So my name is
yo soy
Martin
Martín
Valese. I am
Valese,
the
me presento,
coordinator of
soy
the
coordinador
Global
de la Global
DRS
DRS Platform.
platform. And joining me today,
Conmigo
we
también
have
está
Cesar
a César
from
de la
Global
Global.
DRS
Ahora
platform as
está
well, who
oculto, pero
you
está
can see right now.
ahí. Vamos a ver
And
algunas
he is the one
encuestas
who's going to be in
y todo lo que
charge of
suceda
all the technical
técnicamente, él está
details
detrás
and the surveys that we're going to
sosteniéndolo.
be carrying out.
Y antes de
And
empezar,
before we
comentarles que
start, I just
hoy
wanted to say
también
that
iba a estar con
Jean-Marc
nosotros
Simon was
Jean-Marc
going to
Simón
be joining us today as a
como
moderator, but for
moderador
personal reasons,
y por
he
motivos
won't be
personales
able
no va a poder
to
sumarse
make it. So
al
I'm going to be the
webinar de hoy,
one
así que voy a estar yo
accompanying you today,
acompañándoles
both in
tanto
terms
en
of
esta
coordination
coordinación como
and
en la introducción
in
al
terms
tema
of
que él pensaba hacer.
presenting
Él me
the
pidió compartir y me pasó sus líneas,
subject
así
that
que
we're
las
going to be
compartiré con
talking about
ustedes.
today. He sent me
Y
his
vamos a tener
introduction.
entonces una primera
So, how's this going to
introducción a la
work? We're going to
temática
have a
y
very
después
brief
vamos a
presentation.
tener
Then
8
each speaker
minutos
will
por
speak
ponente,
for
son tres
8 minutes.
ponentes.
We
Ahora
have
las
three
voy
speakers, and I
a
will
ir introduciendo cada
introduce them
una.
as well. And so that
Ellas
they're
van a
going to give their
hacer diferentes
presentations. And
presentaciones
at
y
the
al
end
final de las
of the
tres primeras
presentations, there's
ponentes
going to
vamos a
be
tener un espacio
room
de
for
debate, de
discussion.
preguntas.
You
Ustedes
can
pueden
send your
subir las
questions
preguntas
through
al chat
the
y yo
chat,
voy a ir
and so we
moderando
will
esas
have a Q&A
preguntas y
session as well.
entre los
I will be
ponentes
moderating those
vamos
questions
a ir
and
tratando
asking
de
them
desandar todos
to
los
our
temas
speakers so that we
que
can
vayan
clarify
surgiendo.
anything that comes
Como
up. So
decía,
once
pueden
again, you
escribir sus
can send
preguntas en el
your
chat en
questions
cualquier
through
idioma
the chat
y
in
contamos
any
con
language
la
that you
traducción
want. We have
automática.
simultaneous
Vamos a
translation,
estar
as I was saying.
grabando
This
esta
session
sesión
is
y
also
después
being
la vamos
recorded and it
a
will be
poner a
made
disposición
available
pública
publicly
en nuestra
on
web de
our
la Global.
DRS Global
Así
platform
quien quiera puede
website, so
acceder a
you can
eso.
all access it.
Para
Okay,
empezar,
so Cesar,
vamos a
if you're
estar
ready, we're
lanzando,
going to
César, si estás
start
listo, ahí
with a very short
una pequeña
survey. Okay, these
encuesta.
surveys
Las encuestas son
help
más que
us
nada para
figure
saber
out
de dónde
where
viene el público que está
the audience comes from. So those
viendo
of
los
you who
webinars
join
con
our webinars,
nosotros,
where
tal
you all
vez
come from,
algunas
and maybe a
preguntas
few
más
more
que
questions
podamos
that
ir
come up
barajando a lo largo
during the webinar,
del
which is going
webinar,
to
que va a
last for
durar
about 1 hour.
aproximadamente 1 hora.
Okay,
Entonces,
so
ya yendo
let's
de
dive
lleno
in, and
a la
I'm going
introducción de la
to
temática,
introduce today's
ahí
topic. Oh,
aparece
also
ya
you can
cómo
see
van a
the
ver el...
survey already
a mí por lo
in your
menos ya me
screens. You should
apareció,
be able to see
calculo
them,
que
right? Can you all
todos
see
pueden ver
it?
ahora
Can
el
you see the
quiz, el
poll
poll,
on your
pueden
screens?
ir
And if you can,
votando
then you can vote for
las opciones
the
que les van
appropriate
apareciendo.
options. Okay, so just to
Bueno, como para
again give you
introducir un
an
poco la
introduction,
temática,
when we
eh,
talk about
cuando nosotros hablamos de
deposit
sistema de
and return
depósito,
systems in
digo
general
nosotros
as
en
citizens,
general,
we
ciudadanos,
usually link them to
normalmente los
beverage
asociamos a
containers
envases de bebida,
because
porque
for
hace
a long
muchísimo
time
tiempo que
we
venimos
have been
consumiendo
consuming
más que nada las
mostly
reutilizables en este
reusable
formato, pero en algunas partes del mundo
containers for
también
this format, but
en
also
formatos
single-use
de un solo
containers
uso y también con
for
depósito.
deposit
Pero si
systems.
lo
But if we
pensamos
think
un poco
about it
más, es
a
un
bit more
mecanismo
carefully, then this
que
is a
no
mechanism that
solamente se
has
usa
been
hace muchísimos años,
used for
sino que
many
también
years,
está
but
muy
also
presente en
it's very
nuestra vida
present in our
cotidiana de un
day-to-day
montón de maneras
lives in
distintas.
many different ways,
Desde
like
el
from the
dinero que
deposit
usamos
that
como
you pay, for
garantía,
example,
por
when you
ejemplo,
rent a
cuando
car, when
alquilamos
you're on
un auto,
holiday,
cuando nos vamos de
or
vacaciones
when you
o
rent
cuando
a home,
alquilamos una
or even
vivienda
just
o hasta
giving an
dejar un
ID
documento o usar
or
una moneda
inserting
en
a
un carrito de
coin
un
to
supermercado. En
unlock a
todos estos
trolley at the
casos hay una
supermarket.
lógica
And the
común que
logic
es
behind all these
asignar un
cases
valor
is assigning a
específico
specific value
para
to make
asegurar
sure
que esa
that
cosa que uno se
whatever
lleva
we
vuelve
borrow
al mismo
will
lugar del
come
que
back
salió.
to the place
Y
it
eso
came from.
sabemos
And we know it works because we have lots of examples around the world with many different materials. And this is something that has been working for a very long time. So at Global DRS Platform, we know that this model allows us to recover over 90% of cans, bottles, and cartons, both in the global north and the global south. And we have DRS systems in the global south, and they've been there implemented and in place for decades, and the same in the global north. And this rate, this 90% recovery rate, is really high and it's real. But we don't want to stop there. And at a time where single-use package production is constantly increasing, we would like to discuss today and explore how this logic that works really well for single-use beverage containers could be applied to other materials and other industries, or at least which opportunities this provides for these industries. And above all, what we want to do is to exchange about how we could use these solutions and amplify their impact. So as I was saying, today we're going to hear about three very specific experiences, three people who are working in different ways in this area, so that they can tell us about their experience, their challenges, and so that we can all learn and maybe consult or even build about these experiences. Okay, so Andrea, we're going to start with you. So if you could unmute yourself. Okay, so Andrea Garzón is an entrepreneur and sustainable development and circular economy consultant. She holds an MSc in sustainable forestry and land use management from the Freiburg University. And she works at Huella Verde, the company she's representing here today, where they have been working since 2017 on food courts and shopping centers in Ecuador and Chile to replace single-use tableware with reusable tableware. And they do this by offering washing service that meets high standards of quality and hygiene. So Andrea, you have the floor. You have 8 minutes. I know that you wanted to share a video, so just let me know when you want to, and we'll share it for you. Okay, so hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to tell us about our experience in Ecuador mostly. Okay, so I have called my presentation More Reusable and Fewer Single Use. Yeah, and I think we need to highlight the necessity to have fewer and fewer single-use containers. This is a culture that has been imposing itself in Latin America and around the world as the only solution for everything. And what we want here is to encourage reusing. And this is why I have two logos on the presentation, Huella Verde on the left-hand side and Reusa, which is a campaign that we have launched here. Okay, so in order to understand what we do, you need to understand what food courts like in Ecuador and in many other places in Latin America. These are very, very busy places in shopping centers. Yeah, and shopping centers are enclosed areas where people go for shopping, to take a walk. And in Ecuador, this is a safe place where people go to because of that. Yeah, so it becomes a public area, very crowded. And so food courts offer very varied food options. And this is why lots of people go there to eat. And as you can see on the right-hand side, all the tableware is usually disposable. This is what happens in Ecuador, not everywhere, but this is what happens in Ecuador. And by the way, we in Ecuador, we don't eat a sandwich. Yeah, if we're a respectable Ecuadorian, we're not going to eat a sandwich just with our hands. We eat on the plate, and we use tableware. We use cutlery. We use everything. Yeah, because we eat rice and soup. So there's lots of waste if we use disposable tableware. And I'm going to show you the video now, and then I'll explain to you how the model works. Okay, Andrea, if you want to try and share the video yourself, and otherwise we'll go to the plan B and we'll share it. Huella Verde is a company that focuses on replacing disposable tableware with reusable tableware because it's the one that pollutes the most. In Ecuador, we have at least 60 food courts where all food and beverages are served in single-use plastics and all waste goes all together. Then it's collected by municipalities and it generates negative impact in the environment and human health. We have consolidated a model that transforms food courts into zero waste areas. So we establish industrial washing machinery, and every day we have 141 restaurants, including the most widely known fast food brands in Ecuador, 85,000 pieces of reusable tableware, and this is always saving. In December 2024, we managed to get rid of 50 million of disposable pieces of tableware. And working with Villaverde for us was part of a sustainable management model. We have a few spaces and brands, and we are more and more committed with Huella Verde. And if Huella Verde manage to get to more restaurants and more food courts, we'll always be happy to join you because we really think this is worth it. And in order to sort at the source, we have collecting areas where material can be recovered. We have 2-ton organic and 200 kilos of recyclable material that are sent to managers who then reuse them in farms or recycle it. In 2024, we were already in 4 cities in Ecuador. We had 10 partner shopping centers, which are some of the most important shopping centers in Ecuador. And we also have a pilot project in Chile with Mall Plaza. This is one of the biggest food courts in the country, and so the challenge and the responsibility were huge. But it was very rewarding to see the response of users and how we had a positive organic impact, which ratifies that the decision that we made to partner with Huella Verde was a really good decision. So we also support campaigns that highlight the benefits of reusable containers. For example, with a system such as ours, we're not only getting rid of lots of waste, but we're also getting rid of CO2 emissions linked to transportation and waste management. We also save water because the system uses much less water. And we also generate money because the funds that we use to pay for disposable tableware are now paying the salaries of the workers that are collaborating with this system. Our objective is to replicate the circular model in other food spaces in Ecuador and Latin America and to encourage everyone to reuse. Okay, so it looks like the video worked. Okay, so this was just a video to show you our project, and I think it's quite clear, but just to give you an overview, this is a project that was inspired by what I saw in Germany, for example, when they used deposit systems. And when we analyzed it here, we realized that restaurants didn't want to change the way they worked, and they didn't want to increase prices, and they didn't want to have to deal with cash for deposits. And also we wanted to make it very simple for clients. So the solution that we found was something which is highly collaborative, as you have seen. And in 2024, we had 10 partners. We now have 12. And altogether in Ecuador, we have 60 food courts. We haven't yet managed to work with all of them because we need a commitment from the shopping center to give us a space and facilities to make sure that everything works properly. For example, we would need an area uh, where we don't have to pay for rent or water or electricity, yeah, because we cannot pay for that. So they lend us the space and then we invest in machinery, equipment, and tableware, and we hire people. And this is how we offer our service to restaurants. And basically, what we have done is compete with the money that they were spending on disposable tableware. Yeah, and a plastic dish, which is something people use a lot in Ecuador, was very cheap, about 25 cents. So we need to give them our reusable tableware or dish in this case for 5 cents. So they need to see the difference. So basically, we register in our application everything that we give in the restaurants, and then at the end of the month, we charge them what they have consumed throughout the month. Okay, so they then provide the service and clients get a better experience. We also have these different stations that you saw in the video to sort everything. We are currently working in 5 cities. These are the clients that we're working with right now. And this is a picture of an award that we gave to shopping centers for reaching the 50 million that we mentioned in the video as well. We are creating employment, lots of jobs, especially for women. And I wanted to mention this campaign, Reusa.ec. We're working with beach restaurants to help them make the same change so that they can use reusable tableware. And this has been very welcomed. And we're also doing it in with glasses. We're also doing it with schools. We are donating tableware to schools so that they can use reusable tableware. And I just wanted to finish by saying it is possible to reuse more and to use fewer disposable materials. Our beaches are not disposable and our biodiversity is not disposable. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much. And I think that the last part was a bit fast, but there were many, many interesting things that you mentioned, and we will be able to go over some of those during our discussion later as well. I'm sure you'll want to elaborate a bit more. Okay, so now, Marta, we are moving on to you. And Marta is a lawyer by trade and an entrepreneur, and she created POTS in 2020, which is a company that recovers packaging from fast-moving consumer goods, sanitizes them, and then sends them back to the packet to give them a new life. And amongst their initiatives, they are creating DRS systems for vegetable cream soups for Spanish supermarkets. So Marta, you have the floor.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Hi.
Hola, ¿qué tal, Marta?
Voy a compartir
Okay, so I'm
pantalla.
just going to share my screen.
Vale.
A ver si la veis bien.
Let me see. Let me know if you can see it.
¿Me confirmáis
Can
que
you
se
see
ve
it?
bien la pantalla?
Todavía está
It's
cargando.
still
Ahí se ve
loading.
bien.
Yes, we can see it now.
Perfecto.
Una linda puesta de sol.
A nice
Bueno, o amanecer.
sunrise. Yeah.
Bueno, pues nada,
Okay,
encantada de
so
invitarme aquí
thank you so much
a
for
explicaros
inviting
qué
me
hacemos nosotros,
to
¿no? Yo
join
soy
you here and
Marta,
explain what
como
we
os
do.
comentaba Martín,
I am Marta. As Martin
somos
was
una
saying,
compañía
we are a
española,
Spanish company.
¿vale? Es una compañía que se llama POTS. Mi idea es
We're
explicaros un
called
poco pues,
POTS,
qué hacemos y
and
los
the
retos
idea
que
is
nos
to
hemos
tell you
encontrado.
what we do and the
Entonces, bueno, POTS
challenges
es
that
una
we
empresa
face. So
dedicada a la
POTS is a
reutilización
company
de
that
envases.
is devoted to
Al final, bueno,
reusing
nacimos para dar
containers,
solución a la
and
problemática de
we
la
we
generación
were
de
born
residuos,
to
que lamentablemente, ¿no? Con la
give a
llegada de
solution
los
to
plásticos
waste
de un
creation,
solo
because
uso,
with the
pues
boom
se ha
of
visto
single-use
agravada mucho
plastics,
con los
this
años.
has become
Como decía
more
antes
and
mi
more
compañero, es verdad
serious
que bueno, la
problem. As
reutilización
my colleague was
antiguamente
saying
pues
earlier,
era, por
it's
lo menos
true that
en Europa, era
reusing
algo
was something
habitual, ¿no?
quite
Con los
common,
años
at least
ha
in
ido
Europe,
perdiendo
a few
y
years
lo que
ago,
nosotros
and this is
estamos
something
intentando
that
es
we have
precisamente
lost with the
volver
years. And
atrás,
actually,
¿no?
this is what
Volver
we're
a
trying
la
to do. We're trying
reutilización,
to
que es lo
go
que
back,
hacíamos
going back
antiguamente.
to
Por eso nos gusta mucho decir
reusing.
que
And
no
this is
estamos
why we
inventando
say
nada
that we're
nuevo,
not
sino que de hecho aprendemos
inventing the
del
wheel.
pasado
We're actually
para reinventar el futuro.
learning from the past to reinvent the future. So with all of this, we have created a reusable container management system where we take used containers, we wash them in our industrial plant, and then we send them back to producers. We are very focused on the wine industry, champagne, cava, vegetable cream soups, beers, craft beers, and kombucha. We work mostly with glass jars and bottles, although we do some things with plastics as well. And our model is very simple. We go to the winery and we say, look, rather than buying new bottles to bottle your wine, just repurchase your own bottles from us once we have washed them, and we give them to them at a very competitive price. So the question or the issue here in Spain is, how do we recover those containers? Because producers sell them, they lose track of where they are, and so we recover them in 4 ways. One is direct recovery, when wineries have restaurants or they have agreements with hotels and so on, and so they recover the containers themselves and they send them to our plant. Then we have the Horeca channel, which is hotels, restaurants, and catering or cafes. And we copy the beer model, which is basically the distributor goes to the place and then recovers the used containers, and then we do the haulage. And we're doing also something with vegetable cream soups at supermarkets. And we also do major events. So we're going to be doing, for example, Primavera Sound. We work with Barcelona Trade Fair, and we're also working with Barcelona's City Council so that consumers can go to green spots in the city to give back their bottles. And so we recover all those containers and then we send them to our washing plant. This is, I would say, a copy of French plants, and this is located in the outskirts of Barcelona. We wash 3,000 bottles an hour, and it has an internal blow-off system whereby bottles are ready to be palletized when they're finished. And we also have a multi-format system. We also have a label stripping system, but this is a challenge that I will explain in a second. And obviously, we have sanitary compliance guarantee. Now, in terms of impact, we have measured our CO2 footprint, and we're comparing it with the production of glass. So our system is 86% more efficient in terms of CO2 emissions. And then obviously, social impact is very important for us, and therefore we hire people at our plant who are at risk of social exclusion, and these people are sent to us from the different municipalities in the area. So you can see here the clients that we're working with nowadays. It's a very good mix, and this is a project that is generating a lot of interest, and so we're getting lots of free content created. We always say that we like publicity, and this is very nice, but people really need to roll up their sleeves and get to work, because this is all good and dandy, but we really need to work on this. So let me just mention very briefly the important challenges that we have identified in Europe. So first of all, we have identified container recovery, then washing plants, and then labels. So in terms of container recovery, in Spain, they need to create a DRS system for the whole distribution channel. This is going to be compulsory by law. But the problem is that they're only focusing on recyclable containers. And we're making a lot of pressure on the ministry so that they do not exclude reusable containers, because this is very important as well. Now, another challenge that we find in Spain is that people say that there are no washing plants, and so they cannot do it. So I just wanted to say that in Catalonia, we have created one. It's already working, and it's not so difficult. And actually, there was a study, Rebo to Vino, and they said that with one plant for each region, that would be more than enough. okay? And then the third challenge is labels or adhesive labels. I don't know how it works in other countries, but in Europe, they usually self-adhesive labels and they are not washable. And so when we put the container in the machine, the container comes out with the label still stuck to it. So we have done some research and we have found that there are some adhesives which are called wash-off adhesives, and they work exactly like any other labels, even in fridges and ice buckets and so on, but they are washable. So when the containers come out of the machine, they come out without a label. These are actually being used in some countries in Europe, for example, Germany or France. They are not more expensive than the current labels, and they work in exactly the same way. And we're seeing a high percentage of clients that are now changing to wash-off adhesives. And what we want to make sure is that wash-off adhesives are compulsory by law. So just to say that we think reusing is here to stay, and at least in within the European Union, they are imposing more and more regulations in this respect, and we just encourage companies to try reusing. This is not expensive, and if they try it, they usually stay with it. Okay, so these are just our contact details if you want to have a look, and these are all the companies that have been supporting us all these years. Marta, thank you so much. This was really interesting. And before moving on to the discussion, I already have some questions to ask you. We are going to give the floor to Agustina Legasa, who is a Sustainability and Communication Manager at Quero Ecovasos, which since 2013 has been working with reusable glasses in Argentina. They adapt and customize solutions for different contexts and different clients, and they also encourage environmental awareness raising. And she has a social media alter ego named Blonde Verde, and you can follow her there as well. So Agustina, when you're ready, just let me know and I will share your
Dale, te agradezco. Muchas
presentation.
gracias, Martín, por la
Yeah,
introducción,
thank you,
por
Martin,
la
for
presentación
the
y
introduction and for inviting me to be here, and also for sharing the presentation because I have some connection issues. Yeah, don't worry. Just let me know when you want me to move slides, okay? Yeah, absolutely, no problem.
Dale. Bueno, para empezar, me gustaría hacer una pequeña
Okay, so I would like to
clave para entender
clarify
todo lo que
something
nosotros
that's
hacemos
very
en
important to
Quero,
understand what
y
we
es que
do at
nosotros
Quero.
no nos definimos
And
solamente
it's
como
the
una
fact that we
empresa que vende
don't
ecovasos,
call
sino
ourselves
que
a
más bien nos
company that
pensamos como
sells
creadores
eco
de
glasses, but
conceptos
rather
circulares.
we
¿Esto qué es
are
lo que significa?
creators of circular
Que no creemos
concepts.
que existe
This
una
means
sola y una
that we
única
don't think there's
solución
just
universal
one
para tratar
universal
los descartables,
solution for
porque justamente no es lo
reusable
mismo una
materials,
cafetería
because
que una
obviously the
oficina o
cafes are
un
not the
evento
same as
masivo, y
offices
son todos
or
lugares
major
donde
events, so they
efectivamente
have
podemos
different
usar
needs.
vasos
These are all
reutilizables.
places
La
where we
dinámica
can
de uso,
use reusable
de
glasses,
evolución, de
but the
operación
dynamics of
cambia
use, evolution, and
completamente.
operations is
Entonces,
very,
la
very
estrategia para
different.
que ese
So
ecovaso
the
pueda
strategy
volver
for
y
this
convertirse en
eco
una herramienta de
glass to
economía
come back to
circular
us and
y no en un
become
descartable
a circular
anodino,
economy
requiere una
tool
ingeniería
requires
específica
a very
para cada
specific
uno de nuestros
engineering for
clientes.
each
Y ahí es
of our
donde justamente
clients.
para
And
nosotros
this is
empieza el
exactly
desafío.
where our
Siguiente, por
challenge
favor.
starts. Next slide, please.
Muchas veces
So
pensamos que el
often
cambio
we
hacia
think
reutilizables
that
simplemente es
changing to
reemplazar un
reusable
objeto por otro. Pero la realidad es
materials
que
is
no es
just
así. El verdadero
replacing
cambio
one
no es
object
el
with another, but
ecovaso, sino es
that's
el
not
sistema
it.
que
The
lo acompaña.
change is not the
Con el
glass, but the
descartable, el
system that
modelo lo
accompanies
conocemos muy
it.
bien,
So
es
with
lineal,
disposable
usar y tirar.
materials,
No hay
we
una
know how it works.
responsabilidad
It's
del
just
usuario
use
después del
and
consumo.
discard, and there's
Con
no
el
responsibility
reutilizable, en
from the
cambio,
side of
aparece
users. But
algo
with
nuevo, que
reusable
es la
materials,
responsabilidad
we have
compartida.
a shared
Y eso implica un cambio
responsibility with
cultural.
consumers.
Implica
And
que alguien
this
tiene que
means that there
devolver
needs
ese
to be a
covazo,
cultural
que alguien tiene
change,
que
that people
lavarlo,
have to return that
que
glass,
alguien
that
tiene que
someone
volver
has
a
to
ponerlo en
wash it, and that
circulación.
someone has
Y
to
si
put
ese
it back
sistema no está
in
bien diseñado,
circulation.
lo que
And if
termina
the system
pasando
is not
es que el
well
reutilizable se
designed,
termina convirtiendo
then
en un descartable
this
más caro.
reusable
Y eso
glass
justamente es
becomes
lo que
a
nosotros
more
queremos
expensive
evitar.
disposable
Siguiente,
glass.
por
And this
favor.
is exactly what we want to prevent from happening.
Este es uno de nuestros
Okay,
mayores
so this is one of
desafíos
our
desde Quero,
greatest
es cómo
challenges.
logramos que
How do
esos
we
ecovazos
manage
vuelvan
And how do we make sure that these glasses come back to us? And this is something that we talk a lot with our clients, especially in major events, bars, and cultural centers. The idea is always the same, to make sure that they create a deposit system, which we call seña. And we insist on this because this system places the responsibility on the final user. So deposit means that people see the real cost behind the eco glass. This is something that people don't usually see, the fact that these glasses have environmental and financial costs. And we lose those costs if we don't reuse them. And we have calculated that we need to reuse a glass 7 times in order to break even. So when someone pays a deposit, they are taking an active role in the system, and then they can choose to give the glass back or choose to keep it because they liked it and they are going to continue using it. And both solutions make sense from the point of view of reusing, but actually the value of that deposit is going to define the behavior of users. If it's higher, then people will give it back. And if it's lower, then people might keep it. And this is something that our clients always decide, yeah? So the level of the deposit. But even if we make sure the glasses are returned, then we need to figure out what to do with those glasses so that they can be reused. And this is another of the key pillars of a strategy, which is sanitizing. Because we can only reuse glasses if we have a process that guarantees that those glasses will be back in optimal condition for reuse. And this is something that we understood from the beginning in our first major event in 2014. This is an event that has been happening for many years. And so we took an on-site washing machine where we washed over 40K eco glasses. And this is a system that's still working, yeah? So it's been 12 years and we have been working with them for 12 years. But not all contexts allow for on-site washing. So we have a complementary system with weekly logistics where we take the glasses, we wash them in our plant, and then we take them back. This is something that we use, for example, with bars or cultural centers, and we go every week. We take used glasses and we give them clean glasses. And this is how we create a really circular circuit where glasses are reused over and over again, and we only make new ones if someone has kept them. And this is very important because if we didn't have this, many spaces would not be able to implement reusing. However, there's another thing that was absolutely key for this system to be scalable, which is customization. And customization allowed us to make sure that eco glasses is not just an environmental solution, but also an added value tool for our clients, because this is a very good marketing tool. And in many events, like the picture you see in the slide, the eco glass is part of the experience. It's communication, it's branding, it's memories. And you see people with the eco glass, and just by their design, you know exactly the event they were at. And this has huge value. Yeah. And there's another side to this story, which we really like, and is the fact that each glass can tell its own story and it has multiple lives. Yeah, so it will keep circulating in different contexts. For example, when you meet with friends or when you take it to the beach to make sandcastles. Yeah, so this is another success for us, because actually what we want for these glasses is to have lots and lots of different lives and uses. Also, how do we prevent that this commercial value does not go against reusing? Because actually the design of eco glasses, if it's very attractive, then everyone will want to keep it, and if everyone keeps it, then we lose circularity in the system. Yeah, and this is where we have a very clear stance. This is not just about selling a reusable product, but also we need to build a system that guarantees reusing. And this means that sometimes we need to find some tension with clients. We have even lost clients sometimes about this, but we think this is part of our responsibility. So what do we do? First of all, we offer digitalization and design services, but and we also tell them about deposit, and we make sure that through our design service we use more the designs which can be used over and over again, which are more generic, which are not very modern, so that people place them in a specific time in history. So the idea is, once again, using design to make sure that these glasses have many different lives. And the picture that you see on the slide is from the San Luis province in Argentina. They have 50 festivals this year, and so the idea was to create 50 the same designs for the 50 events that are going to happen throughout the year. And this means the glasses are going to be reusable throughout the year, but also it's a great strategy to reduce costs for the organization. And yet we know that this system does not work on its own. And this is why we don't stop at creating the product. We accompany our clients to implement through training, through strategies for awareness raising, and to communicate the strategy before the event so that everyone that goes to the event knows exactly how it works. And we can even measure the impact. Yeah, we can see how many glasses were reused, the impact on the CO2 footprint, and this means that our clients can be transparent and prevent greenwashing as well. And just to conclude, I wanted to ask a question, which is, can we use this in other for other products and in other contexts? We think so, but there's a condition. And this is not about just creating a product. We need to design the system. And this is very important. And I know that I've said it many times, but we think that the key is to design the system. And this system design needs to take into account incentives. It has to take into account operations, logistics, and washing. It has to encourage cooperation internally and with users, and also create a business model that makes this sustainable over time. If we don't have this, if one of these elements is not present, then the system won't work. And at Kero, our experience shows that this DRS system is not just for eco glasses. It's actually doable for many other things, but we need to make sure that we adapt it to the service. And if we could implement this system in huge festivals and very, very complex events, then this is something that we could most certainly do for many other contexts, such as, for example, industrial containers and many other things that you could think of. And last but not least, and I'm not going to go into detail here, but I think it's worth mentioning, we think that the public sector has a very important role to play in order to escalate and grow these systems. Because in order to do that, we need regulation and regulatory frameworks, infrastructures, and so on that allows us to do this, as well as have spaces such as this one where we can exchange information and help each other. So now, just before I finish, the challenge is not to find reusable glasses, but making sure that they come back to us. And by doing this, we're changing the way we consume. Thank you very much for your time.
Gracias, Agustina. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Agustina. And now we are going to start the discussion. Cesar has been sending me some questions that the audience have been sending themselves as well. And before we go into that, I just wanted to ask a couple more general questions for all of you. You can all answer or not. You can just unmute yourselves if you feel called to answer. First of all, how can DRS systems help solve more complex materials logistics? Agustina, you mentioned something at the end of your presentation, which was linked to this, I think. So what do you think, from what we have been talking about today, how do you think we could activate other materials? I'm going to take the floor, okay? Okay, so as Andrea was saying, I think deposits are not always needed, but rather tracking, yeah? So making sure that we track these products so as to know how many times it was recovered, where the product is located. And I think technology can play a very important role here. We have lots of applications that could definitely help us create this traceability. And for us, the DRS system is distributing responsibility amongst the different actors and users of the system. So basically, the deposit allows us to make sure that if the product is lost or if someone keeps it, then it was paid for, right? So the cost was covered by someone, and we think that if someone keeps it, it's because they're going to
Andrea,
reuse it.
Marta, ¿quieren?
Andrea, Marta, would you like
Yo
to say
tal vez
something?
tengo algo que decir
Yeah, I
y
would like
yo
to
veo
say
que
something.
en muchos casos sí
I
hace
see
sentido,
that
sobre todo pensando
often
en que
it
se cambie de
makes
desechables
sense
a reusables.
to
Por ejemplo, yo
change,
veo
especially
cuando
from
ahora
disposable
transportan a
to
un
reusable,
local
yeah, because I see that, for
yo qué sé,
example, when
carnes,
we're
cualquier
taking
cosa, antes se
meat
hacían gavetas
um,
reutilizables.
to
Ahora por
to
facilidad
restaurants
muchas
or
veces son
to places,
en algo
we used to
desechable, en cajas
use
desechables.
reusable
Entonces
materials,
creo que
but
hay
nowadays they're
muchas
using
oportunidades
disposable
de cambiar
boxes
el
and materials.
desechable
Yeah,
al
so I think there are
reusable.
lots of
Los
opportunities to
pañales, por
change to
ejemplo. Pero
reusable,
ahí a
even
mí me
with
gustó mucho lo que decían Agustín y
nappies, for
Marta,
example.
que para
Yeah,
mí es
Agustin
una
and Marta were saying
conclusión.
something very
Reusar
important,
es lavar,
which is basically
crear
reusing
sistemas
is
de lavado,
washing,
tener
creating
lugares donde
washing
lavar,
systems and
porque
having
realmente el
places
desechable
to
ha venido tan,
wash
tan fuerza
these
con tanta
containers,
fuerza
yeah,
porque nadie quiere
because
lavar
actually
y lavar no es sexy.
disposable
Inclusive cuando ustedes ven
materials
cuando la gente
are
dice
so
que
strong
reciclable,
and
reciclable,
so
todos
famous
quieren,
nowadays because people
no
don't want
es
to wash,
porque
yeah.
algún material, no sé, la baba de un hongo desechable, eso suena más sexy que lavar.
Yeah, because
Entonces siento
people
que
find
tenemos que
that
hacerle más
recycling is
sexy y más
sexier
fácil
than
y
washing.
ver
Yeah,
más
so we need to
opciones
make
de
washing
lavar de una
sexier for
manera
everyone and more
garantizada,
attractive to
la gente
everyone,
sepa que es
so that they
higiénico.
see that it's
Entonces,
hygienic, that that there are
sí, se
assurances
puede
and
crear más
guarantees.
sistemas, sea
And
con
absolutely,
prenda
we will need to create more
o
systems either
depósito
with
o no, pero que
deposit
se
or
fomente
without
más
deposit,
a
but
lo
definitely
reutilizable, a lo reusable
encouraging
que a lo
people
desechable.
to go more full reusable rather than
Después,
disposable materials.
Marta, habías
Marta, you also
mencionado, y creo que es
mentioned,
lo que acabas de hablar,
and I think this
Andrea
is what
y
Andrea
Agustina también,
and
todos
and
estuvieron hablando un
Agustina
poquito
just
del
mentioned
tema
as
de
well.
crear
So
sistemas. O sea,
creating
no es un
systems,
producto,
yeah. So
es un
this is not
sistema y
about a
es toda la
product, it's
lógica que hay
about a system
alrededor de
and the
esa, creo
logic
que hablaron de
around
dinámicas de
it. Yeah, you
consumo,
talked
hablaron de
about
experiencias,
consumption
de
dynamics,
una
you
serie
talked about
de conceptos.
experiences and a number
Y
of
vos
concepts. And
puntualmente,
I think
Marta,
Marta,
habías
you particularly
introducido algunos retos.
talked about
Hablaste un poco
challenges.
del
Yeah,
DRS
you
para
talked
reutilizables,
about a
hablaste también de
DRS
plantas de
system
lavado
for
y también
reusable
cuestiones que tienen que ver con el
materials,
packaging.
washing
Por eso querés
plans,
desarrollar un
and
poquito más
also
sobre esta visión más
packaging.
holística.
Could you elaborate a bit more?
Bueno, lo que pasa es que
Yeah,
cuando empiezas a
I think what
reutilizar
happens is
y
that when
montas
you
un
start
sistema, ¿no?
reusing,
Intentas
you
dar
create a
solución
system
a
to
todo el
try to give
círculo,
a solution
claro, te van apareciendo
to the whole
problemas porque al
circle, yeah,
final
and
ni la
cycle.
administración pública está
And then you start
preparada,
having issues
ni
because
el
public
consumidor está
administrations are not
preparado, ni
ready,
los envasadores, ni
consumers
los
are not
materiales,
ready,
¿no?
packers are not
Entonces es
ready,
algo que poco a
materials are not
poco,
ready,
hasta
yeah.
que no
So this
empiezas
is something that you
a
need to
probar y a
do
lavar,
slowly
no te
but
das cuenta
surely,
de que se
and it's
necesita, ¿no?
something that
Entonces ahí sí que
until you
nosotros yo
start
creo que
washing, you
estamos
don't
sirviendo
realize
bastante
what you
pues
need. And I
como
think
fuente de
this is something
información
that we are
de
doing.
qué
We are becoming a
necesitamos,
source
¿no?
of
En la
information
sociedad en la que
as
estamos
to
hoy en
what we
día,
need,
cuáles son los
what our
requisitos, cuáles son los retos que
society
nos
needs,
encontramos para poder
and
lavar.
what the
Y yo os
challenges are
diría que,
in order to be
insisto
able to
otra vez,
wash.
pero
And
o sea,
once
el
again,
reto
I would
más
say that
grande y
the
que más cambio
biggest
puede dar
challenge
es el tema de los
is
adhesivos. O sea, que es una
the
tontería que a lo
adhesive
mejor la gente ni se da
label, yeah.
cuenta,
And
¿no?
I
Pero es
think it
que,
may sound
¿cómo
silly and
vas a
many people don't
reutilizar algo
realize, but
si hay un
how are you
adhesivo
going
que
to
ahí no sale? O sea,
reuse
nosotros
something
garantizamos
if the label is
condiciones
stuck to it
100% perfectas.
and
Os
it
diría
won't come
que
off?
lo que decía
And
Andrea, ¿no? La
as
manera que
Andrea
tiene
was
la gente,
saying,
no, claro, es que el
people
envase
think,
reutilizable
oh,
no me da la misma
reusable
garantía que un
containers
desechable. Pues no tiene
do
ningún
not
sentido,
provide the
¿no?
same
Porque la gente
guarantees in terms
coge
of
la comida y se
hygiene
la mete en
as the
una
others.
caja
And
de
that doesn't
cartón,
make sense because
¿no?
people then
Con
take
un poco de
a
plástico que nadie sabe
disposable
lo que ha tocado, ni de dónde viene,
container
ni qué le
for the
pasa. Cuando
food
una
and no one
botella es
knows
lavada
what
en un
that container
centro
has been,
de
yeah, whereas a
higienización, es
bottle
que
has
salen las
been
botellas
washed
con análisis clínicos y eso
in
está
a plant
perfecto,
and
¿no?
they have
Con lo cual yo
clinical
creo que,
assurances,
bueno,
yeah.
hay que
So
apretar
I think
por
this is
todos
something that we
lados.
need to make sure we
Está muy
convey.
claro, gracias,
Yeah,
Marta.
very clear. Thank you, Marta.
Andrea, hay un par de
Andrea,
preguntas
there are a
también
couple of
del
questions
público que
from
te voy
the
a leer.
audience that I'm going to read out to you.
Primero,
First of all, the saying, very interesting your presentation. Do you know if the government in Ecuador will make it compulsory for shopping centers to use reusable systems? Do you think this is
Bueno, ahí
doable?
les cuento mi
Well,
experiencia. Yo trabajé
I'll
con
tell
el
you about
sector
my experience. I
público y
worked with
realmente
the
es una
public
gran
administrations, and
frustración.
actually, it's
En
very
Ecuador
frustrate.
se hacen leyes, pero luego nunca se aplican. O sea, realmente es
It's a frustration
desastroso.
in
Y
Ecuador. We create
inclusive
systems,
para que
but then
se
they're not
hagan leyes hay
replicated.
mucho
And
lobby de la
in order to
industria,
create
mucha fuerza,
laws, there's
entonces no
many
llegan a pasar.
lobbying
So,
from the
realmente
industry,
yo
so
ahora
these
solo
laws are not
confío
passed. So
en
nowadays,
el
I
sector
only trust
privado,
the
en la
private
sociedad,
sector
impulsando los
and our
cambios y
society
realmente
as
hemos logrado
change
eso
makers.
solo trabajando
And
así.
this is how
La
we have
experiencia, por ejemplo,
achieved
mía es con
results.
Chile, que
And
Chile es
my
mucho más
experience was
fuerte en
with
el
Chile,
tema
for
y
example,
había
where they
una
are
ley
much
que ya
stronger
iba a
in
ser
this
como en
respect.
Francia,
And they
que
had a
consumir en
law
un lugar
that was
tenía que
going to
ser
be
con
like in
reusables
France, where
y realmente
um,
la presión
everyone
se
in
la
restaurants and so
baja.
on, they had to
Entonces
use
ya iba
reusable
hace un año a hacer,
materials, but
a
it
ponerse
didn't,
a
it
funcionar y
wasn't
se
passed.
aplazó un
It
año
was going to
y
be
justo el mes
passed
pasado
a
ya iba a
year
aplicarse
ago,
y otra
and then
vez
it was postponed, and
se
it was
echó
going to
para
be
atrás.
implemented
Entonces
last month,
realmente
and
no se
then
puede
it's been
esperar.
postponed
Yo,
again.
por
So
lo menos de
once again,
aquí,
I don't
no
think we
espero para
can
nada que las
really
leyes hagan la
place our
diferencia,
hope
sería genial,
on laws
pero
to make a
más
difference. That would be
confío en el que
great,
el
but I
sector
think we
privado
really
quiera
need to work
hacer
with the
la
private
diferencia
sector
y los centros
and make
comerciales
sure
son
that
un
we
poco como
encourage them to
ciudades que
make a
ponen las
difference. And I think
reglas.
shopping
Entonces,
centers are
cuando
like
comienza el
cities and they
centro
create
comercial
their
que
own
ellos
rules.
prohíban los
So
plásticos de un solo
if
uso
shopping
e
centers
impulsen, se
prohibit
logra más que esperando que
disposable
las autoridades lo hagan.
tableware, then we would achieve
E
much more
inclusive yo sé que
than
en
if this
Francia y
came
en
from the
Alemania, que dijo
administration.
las leyes
And I
tampoco,
think
eso
even
está
in
funcionando
France and Germany, where they
maravillosamente.
have
Eso
laws
tal
in
vez sí
place, it's
quisiera
not working
decir.
very
Por
well. And
ejemplo,
this is
en
something
Francia sé que
which
hubo
is
en
important to
McDonald's y
mention.
estaban
Yeah, I
usando
think in
reusables, pero el
France,
sistema era
in
absurdo porque
McDonald's, they were
llevaban a un lugar lejísimos a
using
lavar. No sé si
reusable
lo siguen haciendo.
tableware,
Yo una
but
vez
they were
conversé y
taking
analicé el tema
this
y era
tableware to
carísimo.
places which
Entonces,
were
si
really, really
algo
far away.
es
So it was
tan caro
absolutely
y no es
expensive.
tan
I don't know if it's
lógico y
still the same,
eficiente,
but
es difícil que
it's
sea
important to
sostenible en
know
el
that if the
tiempo. Entonces,
system
es más
is not
importante que sea
efficient and
sostenible y
logical,
competitivo.
then
Como
it
decía
won't make
Marta, que la
sense. Yeah, so the
botella
system
le
has
cueste
to be
igual o menos
sustainable
que
and it
la
has to be
nueva.
competitive. As
Y
Marta
eso
was
es
saying,
el
that
reto en
the
muchos
reused
casos.
bottle is going to be cheaper
Tal
than a
cual.
new bottle.
De hecho, conectado a
Yeah,
eso,
and actually
Andrea
linked to
Osorio
that,
también en el público nos pregunta, ¿cómo
Andrea in
hiciste
the
para
audience
financiar?
is
¿Cómo haces
asking,
para
how do you
financiar,
fund
ya que los platos de cerámica
this?
son más
Because
costosos que
obviously
los de plástico
ceramic tableware
nivel
is more
Bueno,
expensive
económico,
than
ahí,
que cierra
plastic
la
ones. So
cuenta?
how do you,
claro, ahí
from a
lo
financial
básico es
point of view, how
entender
do you
bien
do
lo que es
this?
el ciclo de
Yeah,
vida.
here we
Un
need to
plato de
understand the life
cerámica se compra
cycle,
una
yeah,
vez
because
y
we
luego
buy
solo se lava.
ceramic dishes, for
Entonces,
example,
si el
once, and
plato
then you wash it.
cuesta
So
4
if it
euros,
was
pero la
worth four
utilizo 2000
euros, but I use
veces,
it
hay que
2,000
dividir para
times,
esas
then
2000
you
veces.
divide four
Ahí lo que
euros
más cuesta es el
between
lavado de lavar.
2,000. And the
Entonces el
most costly
desechable
part
me va a
here is the
costar 5
washing. So
centavos, pero a la larga tengo que
disposable
lograr
plate
que
is
el plato de
going
cerámica
to
rote
cost
muchas
five
veces,
cents. And
porque
basically what I
5
need to make
centavos es
sure
para usarlo
is
una vez
that
y botarlo.
reusable tableware is used thousands of times.
Claro, rotación,
Sí, sí
rotación,
funciona.
So
rotación.
yeah, so rotating, rotating,
Claro,
rotating.
sí
Yeah, they have
funciona
to be
siendo
reused
súper.
all the time.
Realmente yo ya le he
Yeah,
metido,
I actually,
creo que igual que
I
Marta y
think like
Agustina, la
Marta
lógica
and
empresarial,
Agustina,
que hay
I
que ser
have a very
competitivos y
business
súper
mindset now. This is
eficientes.
what we have to do. We have
Entonces
to be
nosotros lo
competitive
que
and we
más
have
nos
to be
cuesta es
extremely
mano de obra,
efficient. The
porque
most
recoger los platos, lavarlos,
costly
entregarlos
part
requiere de
is
mucha gente
actually
y
the
realmente las
workforce,
personas
yeah,
tienen que
because
ser
this
muy eficientes.
needs many
No
people for
podemos
the
tener
system
muchas
to
horas.
work, and people
Entonces,
have to
para
be
poder ser
very efficient. We
competitivos con el
cannot take
desechable,
hours
hemos
and hours.
tenido
So
que
in order to
ser,
be
pero
competitive
requete
with
eficientes, ver cómo
disposable tableware, we
utilizar
have had to
menos
become
insumos
very,
posibles, que no
very
se pierda
efficient,
la
making
vajilla
sure that
y las
tableware doesn't
personas
get lost
trabajar
and that people
súper bien
work
para no
really,
requerir
really
muchas
well so that
personas.
we
Por
don't need
ejemplo,
that many people.
realmente hemos
Yeah, for
aprendido
example,
mucho. En el primer centro
something that we
comercial al
learned
comienzo teníamos
in
4
the first shopping
personas haciendo
center,
lo mismo que ahora hacen dos.
where we worked,
Y
we
no
had
es que
four
les
people
están
doing what two
esclavizadas,
people do now, and
sino
this
que
is
hemos
not
aprendido a
about
hacer todo más
slavery,
rápido.
yeah, or
Y
making them
eso es
work too
clave,
much. It's just basically
porque
that we
así
have learned
tienes que
to
reducir
do this
costos
faster,
y
and this is
realmente
very
la
important because
reutilización
it
yo sí
helps us
pienso que en la
reduce
mayoría de costos,
costs.
en la mayoría de
And I think
casos
in
hay
many
cómo hacerlo
cases,
competitivo, porque
we
un
can
desechable es
definitely
un absurdo
make
absoluto. Son
reusable
materiales
tableware
nuevos,
competitive because actually
transportas,
disposable
fabricas
doesn't make
para
sense.
usarlo
You
una
have
vez
to
y
use
botar,
new
o sea,
materials that you
económicamente
transport, that you
realmente
produce,
tampoco hace
and that you
sentido.
then
Entonces
throw
tiene
out.
que
Yeah.
hacerle que funcione,
So
sea eficiente el
again, we
sistema de
just need to
reuso
make sure
para
that
que
the
pueda
reuse
competir.
system is efficient and competitive.
Gracias, Andrea. Después,
Thank you, Andrea.
yo me
And
quedaba pensando, porque
also,
creo que
I was
Marta, vos
thinking, I
habías
think, Marta, you
mencionado,
mentioned,
en realidad las tres
actually,
mencionaron la
the
medición
three
de
of you
impacto, ¿no?
mentioned
De
about
diferentes maneras,
measuring
pero yo
impact
me había
in
anotado
different
acá
ways. But I
vos hablaste
noted
también de
here that,
reducción de emisiones
Marta,
de
you
CO2, creo
mentioned
que hablabas de un
reducing
86%,
CO2 emissions. I think you said something
o algo
like
así. Generalmente cuando
86%
hablamos de sistemas de
reduction in
cómputo, lo
CO2
más
emissions. I think when we talk about DRS, the first thing that comes to mind is reducing the amount of waste. Yeah, so using less disposable materials, such as Andrea was saying. But obviously, there's an environmental impact as well. Yeah, could you elaborate on that, Marta? Maybe yourself, if you can take the floor, or Agus or Andrea?
Sí, nosotros lo que
Yeah,
hicimos fue el año
what we
pasado,
did
pues que el impacto
last
es
year,
evidente,
because
¿no? Lo
obviously
que
the
dices tú,
the
Martín, a
impact
nivel de cuanto
in terms of
menos, ¿no? Residuos se generen, eso ya de por sí es
less
un impacto ambiental.
waste
Pero a
generation is very important,
nivel
right? And this
emisiones
is
de
something that
CO2,
always comes to
lo que
mind.
hicimos fue
But in
el
terms
año
of
pasado,
CO2
pues
emissions,
medirnos
what
uno
we
cada
did
mes de
was that
nuestro
we
proceso
measured
productivo,
every
cogimos todos los
month
datos
from
para ver
our
pues
production
bueno, qué
process.
huella nos
We took
salía.
the data to
Y luego lo
see our
que
carbon
hicimos también es
footprint,
comparar
and then we
esa
compared
huella gate
that
to gate, o
carbon
sea, del
footprint
proceso productivo puro y duro,
within our
con la huella del proceso de fabricación del
production
vidrio que las grandes
process
vidrieras, ¿no?
and
Pues
compare
publican
it
en sus
with
informes de
glass
sostenibilidad y ahí
production
pues tienes
process
los datos. Entonces,
data,
claro, lo
which
que
is
nos sorprendió
published
muchísimo
in
es que realmente
sustainability
proceso
guides
productivo
from these
contra proceso
producers. And
productivo
actually, what surprised us is
es
that
que es
when
un
you compare these two
86% más
production
eficiente en
processes,
emisiones de CO2, ¿no?
ours
Con lo
is
cual,
80%,
bueno, creemos que es algo
86%
que hay que
more
explorar
efficient
y hay
than
que
the other
seguir
one. So this is
trabajando.
something that we
Aquí sí que quiero
definitely need to
clarificar que hay
keep
que
on
tener en
working
cuenta que
on.
las
And just
logísticas
to
no están
clarify,
incluidas en el cálculo,
logistics is not included
porque al
in this
final, claro, no lo
calculation,
sabemos.
okay?
Hay
Because
clientes
we're
pues, que
not
no
very
compran
sure
ellos
about logistics,
directamente,
because
los
some clients
supermercados, por
bring
ejemplo, aprovechan las
their
stickers de
own
vuelta en sus fábricas
containers
y
to
pasan por nuestra
us,
planta y nos lo
and some
devuelven, con lo
supermarkets
cual lo que hemos hecho es hacer el
use their
cálculo
logistics
del proceso
route
productivo
to
puro y
take
duro
their
y luego
containers
las
to us.
empresas,
And
¿no? Los
so we
clientes
have
ya
just
se
measured the
añaden
actual
sus
production
logísticas o
process,
si lo
and then
cogemos
companies
nosotros,
can add
facilitamos
the
nosotros nuestra
logistics.
huella
Or
de
if
producción.
it's us doing the logistics, then
Gracias,
we give
Marta.
them our
Andrea,
carbon
¿quieres decir
footprint
algo?
for
Agus.
logistics.
Sí,
Andrea,
bueno,
Agus, would you
en
like to add
nuestro
something?
caso es súper importante
Yeah,
tener
in
esa
our case, it's
información
really
porque nos
important to have
cuestiona
this
mucho.
information because this
Se
is
gasta
something that
mucha
people
agua con las
question. Oh, but
vajillas,
you use
las
a lot of
emisiones.
water
Entonces,
and
hemos hecho cálculos
you are
nosotros y
generating
usamos
CO2
también
emissions as well. And
publicaciones.
so
A mí me
we
gusta
have
mucho
our
una
own
que se llama Release
calculations
Wins
and we also use
de Upstream, que
publications.
ahí, por ejemplo, hace el análisis de
There's one
lavar
I
500
really
veces
like
una
where
taza
they
versus
analyze, for example,
utilizar 500
washing
veces un
500
vasito
times a
desechable.
cup or
Y ahí
using
es buenas
500
emisiones, es muy
disposable
evidente que
cups.
siempre
Yeah,
es la
and
huella
here
mucho
it's
menor
very clear
en
that
reusables
the
que
carbon
en
footprint is
desechables,
much lower
inclusive de lado.
with
Nosotros, por ejemplo,
reusable
hemos calculado con
tableware.
nuestras máquinas cuánto vieron en el
Yeah,
video,
you
cuánto
saw
usamos
in the video we
en
have
lavar un
calculated
plato, que
how
es
much water
al
we
menos
use
10
to
veces
wash a
menos
plate,
agua
and it's
que
10 times
producir un
less
plato.
water
Entonces sí
than would be
toca
used to
explicar todo
create a
el
new
ciclo de
dish.
vida
So
y
it's very
solo en
important to
transporte
explain the whole
nosotros
life
de
cycle,
todos
yeah?
los
And for example,
desechables de
just in terms
solo
of
camiones que vienen y
transport,
que van todo el tiempo, solo en transporte ya
we
tenemos
have
una huella
seen that
de
our
carbono
carbon
súper
footprint
importante de lo que hemos
is
evitado.
much lower than it would be
Agustina.
with disposable
Sí, en nuestro
tableware.
caso por ahí es muy
Yeah,
evidente
and
que
in our case,
nuestro covaso es de
with
plástico, ¿no?
our
Es
eco
diferente, usa
glasses, our
mayor
eco
cantidad de
glasses
plástico
are
justamente porque es más
plastic. They
duro,
use more
es más
plastic because
resistente
they are
y por
harder, they are
ende su
more
impacto, si
resistant,
hacemos
and
un uso
therefore,
contra un
if
uso,
we
va a ser
compare
mucho
one
mayor
use
impacto
versus
ambiental
one
el
use,
reutilizable
then
que
the
el
reused
descartable, el desechable.
reusable glass
Y
is
ahí
going
es
to
donde la
have a higher
reutilización
impact,
es
and this is
la
why
clave del éxito.
reusing
Nosotros,
is the key
nuestras
to
estimaciones nos
success.
da
And our
7
estimates says
reutilizaciones
that
para
we
llegar
need,
al
as I
punto
was
de
saying, that we
equilibrio.
need
Ahora,
7
no va a ser lo mismo y nuestros cálculos no
times
son iguales para
use
lo
in
que
order
es un
to
evento
break
masivo,
even. But actually, this
donde
is
por
not
ahí
the
el
same for
ecovaso en
major
un lugar se
events
utiliza
where
entre
an
2 y
eco
3
glass
a
is going to be
4
used
veces,
between
pero que
2 and
después por
even
ahí se lo
4
sigue
times
reutilizando en su
in
casa, que por
during the
ejemplo en una
event, and
oficina
then it
donde el
can be
ecovaso se
used at
utiliza
home,
todos los días
or
en más de una
an
oportunidad.
office
Entonces
where
el
eco
impacto
glasses
en
are
términos
used
en
multiple
términos
times
ambientales,
throughout the
de
day.
huella
So
de
in terms
carbono,
of carbon
de evitar
footprint
la
and
generación
environmental
de
impact
descartables, varía
and
y depende qué uso se
reducing
le da a ese ecovaso.
the generation of disposable materials, it's very clear.
Tenemos
Yeah.
otra pregunta para vos,
Yeah.
Agus.
Another question for you,
De
Agus.
Dale.
Mónica Adamus. Dice, ¿cuál es el coste de distribución
What
y
is the
operación,
distribution and operation
lavado,
cost,
devolución logística para un
wash
festival?
and
¿Y cuál es
sending back
el
for
porcentaje de
for a
devolución
festival, music festival,
aproximadamente?
and what is the
¿Habéis
percentage
probado
of
también un proyecto
recovery?
sin
Have you
depósito?
also tried a project without
Bien,
deposit?
sí. Los costos
Okay,
son
so
súper variables
costs are
porque la Argentina es
extremely
un país
variable
muy, muy
because
grande,
Argentina is a
entonces no es lo mismo
very
tener que
big
irnos
country,
a
so
una
it's not
punta
the
del país
same
con la máquina
going
y tener
to
que
one part of the
justamente
country
llevar las
with our
máquinas, llevar
equipment
personas para que hagan el
and with the
trabajo
people then it is to work for events which are located around the area where our plant is located, because this is easier, right? And our idea is always to become much more competitive than disposable materials. So, for example, in terms of washing for recurring events in the area where we are located, washing cost would be smaller, a bit less than using a disposable glass. And this is how we want to incentivize that people choose the system. And what was the other question? Oh, yeah, whether we have tried to not use deposit. Yeah, actually, this is something that our clients decide, and they're the ones who will decide whether they want to implement a deposit system. And actually, some of our clients charge that deposit, but they don't give you the option to get that deposit back because they don't want to be using cash, as Andrea was saying. Yeah. So again, this is something that users buy, then therefore they become the owners. That they can always give it back if they want to. And in these cases, what happens is that users take the first eco glass, but then the next time that they go to the party, they won't take an eco glass home. Yeah, and there was another question. Do you know the percentage of recovery? So how many of the eco glasses that you send to events come back to you? Again, this depends a lot on every event and also the design. If you choose a very nice design, then people will want to keep it. But if we're talking, for example, festival, music festival, people like to take the glass home as a memory, yeah. And actually, it's one of the cheapest merchandising products that you can find in this kind of events. And some people actually collect them, yeah. So they take the glass from each edition every year, yeah. So just to give you an idea, there was a festival this year where we washed 20% of the eco glasses that were consumed on site every day. Yeah. So this is on site, but again, this is a big festival, and this is one of those festivals that people usually take the glasses home as a memory. Okay, and just a final question, because we only have a few minutes left. How do you think we could take a step forward in terms of very dangerous waste fluxes, such as batteries, tires, and so on?
No sé, tal vez para
Well,
mí dando algún
I don't know, maybe
incentivo para lo
we could try to
que sean durables,
incentivize
mientras las
that
baterías sean más
these
durables, sean más
products
rellenables, no
are
sé,
more
porque las
sustainable,
llantas,
or like,
que es
for
el
example,
caso,
batteries, that they have a
antes
longer
habían
life.
aquí
Or
muchas
with tires,
llantas
for example, we used to
viejas, ahora ya hay
see
un sistema
lots
de
of old
reencauchado,
tires, and now
hacer cosas
there
con
are
las llantas
systems
que
which
permiten alargar
allow
su vida útil.
to
Ahí,
increase the
o sea, ya sea que sea
use
algo
life.
orgánico
Yeah, so
o algo
it
por
can be something
autoridades
organic or
impulsado, pero
something
sí
that
creo
is encouraged
que
by
debería
the
haber como un
authorities. But I
fomento
think
a que
definitely
las cosas
we
duren
should
más.
encourage producers to make things last longer. Marta, anything you would like to add?
Bueno, yo la verdad que no soy experta,
Well,
¿no? en
I'm not an
baterías
expert
ni
in
neumáticos, no
batteries
tengo
or
mucha idea.
tires or anything,
Pero sí que creo lo
but
que veo aquí, sobre todo que lo
from
importante es
what
que
I
se
have seen, I
devuelvan,
think the
¿no?
most
Aquí lo que se está
important thing
intentando hacer
is
mucho es
for
pues, que la
them,
gente devuelva
for
sus
those
aparatos
materials to be
electrónicos
recovered. Yeah,
usados, ¿no?
so
Al
the
final
electrical
hay
devices,
muchos
electronic devices,
proyectos que pueden
anything else.
usar
And
el
I
componente
think
en
there are
sí
many
como
projects
tal
that
o
can use those
partes
components or
¿no?
parts
de componentes para hacer otras
of those
cosas, ¿no? Hay
components
proyectos de
to
neumáticos que
create
creo que
new
hacen
things. I think in some
piezas de estas
projects
que
they
se ponen en
use
los carriles
tires
bicis, otros son
to
trituras,
then
no sé
put
qué
them
tratamiento
in
hacen y hacen
cycle
estanques
lanes, and then
infantiles,
some others
¿no? De estos
use
que son como
certain
acolchados, con lo
materials
cual
to make
creo que lo importante es
the
precisamente
ground
establecer algún
of
tipo de sistema de
playgrounds
depósito para
for
este tipo
children. So I
de
think
materiales
we
para que
would
la
need to
gente o
create a
las empresas
deposit
pues
system for those
los puedan
materials so
devolver
that
cuando acabe la
consumers
vida
and
útil.
businesses can send them back.
Gracias, Marta. Agustina.
And Agustina?
Yo creo que siguiendo la línea de lo que
Yeah,
decían Marta y
I
Andrea,
think
justamente para
um,
que un producto pueda
if we
volver,
want to
tiene
make
que
sure
tener un
that a
valor.
product
El
comes
valor no
back,
tiene que
then
ser tanto
it has
para
to
la
have some
persona
value. And this
que lo tiene
value
que llevar a que ese camino
has to be perceived by the person who
como
has
para
to
la persona
bring
que lo
it
tiene que
back,
recibir
as
y
well
darle y
as
revalorizarlo. Entonces me parece
by the
que lo
person who
importante en
has
este
to receive
momento
it
es,
and
no
reuse
sé,
it. So I
baterías,
think
neumáticos, como decía
batteries,
Marta, ¿no? Que
tires,
tenga
as
un
Martha was
uso
saying,
después para
let's
que
make
alguien
sure
quiera
that we
recuperar ese
can
volumen de
reuse them so that
residuos.
someone is
Y por
interested
otro
in
lado,
recovering
un
those
incentivo
materials, and at
para
the
el
same time,
ciudadano común a pie que es el que
incentivizing
usa, que es
citizens
el usuario final de ese
who are the
producto,
final
para que
users
tenga
of
el
that
incentivo
product
para
to then
moverse hacia el lugar
go
donde tiene
and
que
take
devolverlo, porque de eso
that
se trata en
product
definitiva.
to the place where it has to be
Buenísimo,
recovered
Gus.
and collected.
Creo que ahí hiciste tipo un cierre,
I
un
think with
cierre
this,
tal vez
you
de uno de los
you
conceptos más
concluded
importantes.
one of the most
Para
important
cerrar hoy ya
concepts that we have
no
mentioned
nos queda
today.
tiempo, así
We have
que
run out
estuvo
of
muy
time,
interesante. Nos
but
podríamos
it
quedar
was really
charlando mucho
interesting.
más
We
sobre
could be
esto.
talking about this
Creo que
for
quedó muy
much
claro que
longer.
los
I
sistemas de
think it's very
depósito no
clear
solo
that
son una herramienta para
DRS
gestionar
systems are not just a tool to
materiales, sino que también
manage
es una forma, como decías
materials,
vos
but
recién,
also,
de
as you were
recuperar
saying,
o de
it's a
mantener y
way
sostener
to
y generar
recover
valor,
and to
¿no? de las
generate
cosas que usamos
value
en el día a día.
of objects and
Pero
items
también
that we
un punto
use on our
súper
day-to-day
importante
basis. And I think
que se
something
tocó
else
hoy,
which
que tiene que
is
ver
very
con
important that
pensar
was
en el
mentioned
formato
today
de sistemas,
is
¿no?
thinking about
Hay un
systems.
montón de
Yeah, there are
variables y
many
actores que
different
tenemos que
variables
articular
and
para que todo
actors
esto
that we will need to
funcione.
coordinate to
Así
make sure
que
that this
muchas
works.
gracias,
So
Andrea,
thank you very
Marta,
much, Andrea,
Agustina,
Marta,
por compartir las
Agustina, for
experiencias de
sharing
ustedes,
your
y a
experiences,
todos los que
and
estuvieron
to
hoy
all
por
those of you
acompañarnos.
who have
Y para
joined us
cerrar
today.
solamente
And so just to
un par de
conclude, a couple
mensajitos
of
es,
messages.
los invitamos a seguirnos
We
a nosotros en la
invite you
Global
to
DRS
follow
a
us
través de Resource
the
Hub que tenemos
DRS
en nuestra
global
web, en donde
platform
tenemos
through
herramientas, casos
our
de estudio,
website where we have
reportes y demás,
resources,
todos
case
vinculados a la temática
studies,
que estuvimos charlando
reports, and
hoy.
so on, all linked to what we
Sumarse
have been
también
talking
para los
about
que estén
today. And
interesados
for those of
en
you who
desarrollar
are
sus
interested in
conocimientos o
developing
capacidades
your
en términos a
knowledge
sistemas
or
de
your
depósito, a la
abilities
Global
on
DRS Academy,
DRS systems,
y
to
conectar con los
join the
ponentes
Global
y con la
DRS
comunidad.
Academy.
Vamos a
And
estar
also
publicando todo
get
lo
in touch
que
with the
charlamos hoy
speakers and the
en la
community. We
web y
will
en
publish
LinkedIn, así
everything
que
that
lo
we
van a
said
poder
today
seguir, y
on
vamos a
LinkedIn
taguear
and on our website.
a Andrea, a Agustina y
And
a Marta
Andrea,
también,
Marta,
para que
and
puedan seguirlas ahí.
Agustina
Así que
will be
muchas
tagged
gracias
as
por
well, so
estar
you
hoy
can follow
y
them
hasta
as
la
well. So thank you
próxima.
very much for being here with us today, and see you next time.